Okay, so then, good evening, everyone. Brilliant to hear from you all this evening. That's good. You can all see us. You can see the screen. You can all hear us. So that's fabulous. Okay, so welcome to this evening's webinar. This one has been a very popular one amongst our members because it's all on a subject very close to all of our hearts, which is the standards check. I'm very fortunate tonight to be joined by John Selbey, who is a DVSA examiner. He's actually a supervisor, so I'm going to just let John introduce himself because I feel he'll do his job role a bit more justice than me.
Hi guys, yeah, John Selbey from the DVSA, as Olivia said. My current role is twofold really. I am responsible for a team of ADI examiners that conduct both the qualification exams and also the standards check, which is what we're here to talk about this evening, across the whole of North East England. But I'm also part of a team developing staff to also deliver these examinations across Scotland and Northern England. So I very much do a staff development role as well.
Brilliant, excellent. So John is a very, as you can understand, he's a very important person to know when it comes to these matters, and extremely knowledgeable, extremely experienced, and all of the rest of it. So we are very privileged to have him give up his time for us this evening. So that's fantastic. Right, okay, most of you know me. I'm Olivia, been at DIA, Part Furniture. So I don't really need too many introductions with a lot of you because I know a lot of you know me. But yeah, I'll deal with the training courses and other bits and bobs on there as well. So, yeah, okay, we're going to move on. So the agenda this evening, we're just going to quick overview of the standards check marking form, the SC1. So I'm going to show up an example form. I know the majority of you have probably seen it already or familiar with it, but for anyone that's not, then we'll just show that briefly. We're going to then talk about the 7 areas of the standards check, the performance criteria that seems to be, more of a problem, has been more of a problem with some, and then we'll deal with your questions. Some questions we'll deal with along the way, and then some we'll deal with at the end as well, so there'll be a chance. So if you've got anything really relevant you feel you need to ask at the time, then by all means use your text box, and then it will come through to me and I can read it out. Okay, right, so overview. So the SC1 is the standards check marking form for examiners. So I think it's important to get this into perspective, and I'm hoping John will agree with me that it's a document for examiners, and what we're finding is that some ADIs, not all of them, but some, perhaps because they need a bit more, they're not aware of all the resources available, like the ADI1 and other documents important such as that, are there. So they're doing a lot of their prep for their standards check, or trying to gain information for this new test that's come out, using the marking sheet that the examiners use. So trying to sort of unpick it and backwards engineer what they feel they need to do from the criteria. So in general, there are 3 broad areas that the examiner will look at us ADIs to assess our competence, which are lesson planning, risk management, and teaching and learning strategies. So under each of those 3 headings, they're broken down a bit further. So with 4 criteria for lesson planning, 5 for risk management, and 8 for teaching and learning strategies. So there are 17 competencies in total, not 17 per heading, although I think we'll all be giving up right now, going home. We need to read as ADIs, and myself included, I've been reading up about this for the last couple of years, official information in order to understand what is required for us to display these competencies. And again, the health warning on that, these are competencies that we need to be putting into place every single day for every single hour of tuition that we give, not just for every couple of years or every 4 years when we get that letter on the doormat. So that's something extremely important that we all, most of us all bear in mind. Also, the national standards for driver and rider training, again, really important document, 6 units in there, go through everything from, you know, the making sure the ADI and the car is legal, all the way through to, you know, coaching, dealing with risk in terms of your work, in terms of health and safety, all the way to, you know, role play if you're in an instructor training role. The DVSA, the ADI1 document is something to look up. You can just type ADI1 into Google and it will bring up a PDF of a read-only document of that, and that's, you know, some very useful information in there as well. And don't forget the DIA. We also produced our essential guide. It's a guidebook. It's not the be-all and end-all. It's not going to answer all your questions, but it's a guide with some of that critical information in there. So for those of you that are not familiar with that, then you can have a little look into that as well. Okay, so there's the example SC1 marking form. So you can see that you've got the about a third of the way down, you've got starts lesson planning, risk management, teaching and learning strategies. And then on the other side, you've got all the boxes which ranging in level of competence from 0 to no evidence up to 3, which is demonstrated in all elements. So you've got that. So that is something which you will see a copy of at some point when you have your standards check. So right, the first one, the first competence, the first area that's cropped up is under the lesson planning. So John, I don't know if you wanted to start with this one.
Yeah, why not? I think it's probably important to say that these are in order that they appear on the SC one, and it's not necessarily the order, if you like, a top 7 counting down, so no specific order from that point of view. But lesson planning obviously is very important, and the last one on the lesson planning on the SC one was the lesson plan adapted when appropriate to help the pupil work toward their learning goals, is an area that that ADIs appear to be struggling with a wee bit. At the end of the day, the most important person on your lesson is your client, your customer, and you need to make sure that learning is taking place. And what we've got on the screen in a minute, and we've got this for all of the 7 that we're looking at this evening, is extracts taken straight out of the ADI1 that Olivia was referring to earlier. And in chapter 4 of the ADI1, and starting from, I think it's about point 32, is where you will find all this information that we're going to see tonight. And it will both show you what you need to try and avoid from a lack of competence point of view for each of the 17 lower competencies that we're referring to, but also it goes on to show you the type of things that will help you demonstrate that competence. So it's a very useful document to have. It is written for examiners in order to be able to assess, but there's no reason why you guys shouldn't be referring to it as well, because, you know, one of the things that we have made certain that we've done this time, compared to with the old check test, is that everything that the examiners have got is available to use as well. So we're being as open and transparent about the standards check as we possibly can be. So if you look halfway down the screen there, we've got indication of lack of competence include persisting with the plan despite the pupil being clearly out of their depth, people demonstrating faults or weaknesses that should lead to a rethink of the plan. So again, we're not just talking about a one-off incident here. It's something where quite clearly the plan that you've embarked on and agreed earlier on at the beginning of the lesson or before the lesson even, for whatever reason, it isn't working. Or the alternative is it's working perfectly fine, but you've decided to change the plan for no apparent reason, and not explaining that change of plan to the pupil as well. So it's about working together and ensuring that a change of plan is appropriate. to the lesson. Okay, if we have a look at the next slide, then it should just come over. You'll start to see that the opposite to some of the things I've just been talking about is comparing the actual performance of the pupil with the claims and clarifying any differences. Responding to other things that occur during the session and dealing with, or even issues that have been raised by the pupil. But also looking out for those all-important non-verbal signs to, pupils often, as I'm sure you'll appreciate, they often will want to do what you're asking them to do, albeit they don't feel totally comfortable with doing so. And therefore, they won't verbalise the fact that they aren't comfortable, but their body language normally gives it away. So it's looking out for those telltale signs. And changing, as I say, changing in agreement. So don't just change without consulting, I think is probably the advice I would give. You need to have a conversation. The whole standards check is driven around trying to engage with the customer more. Now, that's not always going to be possible. We accept that, and I think it's important for me to say that from the outset. You'll create the opportunity to engage with the customer and for them to interact with you, but they may choose not to interact back. Okay, that's fine. That's their choice, and that is therefore you need to change your instruction style, your teaching style, to match that, and we'll come on to that a little bit later on when we look at the teaching and learning strategies about making sure that the style of tuition that you're using matches the client's desired learning method. Okay?
Okay, brilliant. Yeah. So yeah, everyone's listening intently to you there. So that's great. So again, if anyone's got any questions or anything to add, then please feel free to pop those in. So that's, absolutely. Just putting yourself in the place of someone on the receiving end of learning. You go to a course yourself or go to learn something yourself, and it's not really gelling with you, but the trainer is not actually adapting or doing anything about it. It's that type of feeling lost, isn't it, that we want to avoid with our pupils.
Yeah, and I think all good plans, as they say, don't always come off the way we intend them to come off, and for whatever reason the pupil doesn't perform as well as you regularly see them perform, because you've got the man from the DVSA sat in the back, and they feel a little bit more under pressure, and so they make more mistakes than usual. That's fine. They're allowed to make mistakes. What we need to do, though, is decide whether the agreed course of action at the beginning of the lesson is the right one to continue on, or whether a change of plan would be better suited to the circumstances that you're faced with at the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, sometimes there aren't any, as you say, any hard and fast rules. You need to adapt. You need to be just aware of everything, don't you? And aware of the situation, aware of how the pupil's responding. As you say, lots of non-verbal cues in there as well. Active listening, and respond in a way that is appropriate at the time.
Yeah, and I would just warn people about the potential pitfalls of planning the standards check to such a degree that you've got the lesson down, including the route down to the last junction, the last minute, because unfortunately pupils don't always play ball with that, and that might put you into an awkward position if you're not able to then adapt the lesson when something doesn't quite go to plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Even you say coming down to the route, have a route in, something in mind, but as you say, planning it down to that level of detail. If you've got some roadworks that suddenly cropped up, or cars broken down, or or the pupil's done something which you need to go around the block again, or then you need to have that level of flexibility.
Absolutely.
Okay. Should we pop onto the next slide then, John?
Yeah, sounds like a plan.
Okay. So, risk management, everyone's favourite, this one.
And this is the first of the lower competencies on the risk management section of the SC1. Did the trainer ensure that people fully understood how the responsibility of risk would be shared? I'd like to suggest that all good instructors already do this, not necessarily in the language that you see written down in ADI 1 or on the standards check 4, but you already have conversations about level of instruction, for instance, and how much help you're going to give your pupil during the course of the lesson, depending on their ability. But it is something that people are getting a little bit concerned about, and we are hearing some fairly stock statements being said at the beginning, and that's fine. But again, you need to make sure that anything that you agree with your client, your pupil, you also then follow through with and deliver on. And that's one of the pitfalls that we're finding or observing on the standards checks, is that statements are being made and then something totally different is being demonstrated. So if we move on to the next slide, Olivia.
Yeah.
Okay. There we have some of the indications of lack of competence found to address the issue of risk management, so ignoring some of the situations that have occurred. There's the one I was talking about, giving incorrect guidance about where the responsibility lies for the management of risk. So telling them, for instance, telling your pupil that you're going to leave them to drive independently, but actually not leaving them to drive independently at all, and constantly getting in front of them and telling them what to do. So you're clearly not practicing what you're preaching, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
And likewise, there's one failing to explain how the dual controls will be used. So just to mention, so as you know, I've got the dual controls here in front of me. I'm not planning on using them, however, I will use them in the event of a situation developing where I feel you need some help. But I will tell you that I've used them once I've used them, so you'll know that they've been used. Yeah. There's a very quick statement that covers that off, for instance.
And in terms of those people who are fleet registered trainers, or they don't have dual controls perhaps, or they train in their customers' vehicles, and it's things like that, because obviously you can take one of those people along, that's fine, to develop an aspect to their driving, but it's also, a lot of questions have come up, well, what do I do then, because I don't have dual controls?
And that's fine.
Yeah.
If it's not there to be explained in that detail because there aren't dual controls available to you, we're not going to penalise you for that. You can't tell somebody you're going to use dual controls that don't exist. So therefore, it's covered off that way. We assume the positive and only start to look at the marking and maybe deducting marks, if you like, for want of a better phrase, once we've got evidence to support that. And if there are no dual controls, we can't have evidence to that effect.
No.
However, if you did feel, dual controls, we're not just talking about pedals, we are potentially talking about steering wheels, parking brakes, whatever. I wouldn't necessarily expect a statement to have to be made, but if you did find yourself in the very unlikely position when doing a fleet with a full license holder of having to maybe push the steering wheel away, I would suggest that the same rules still apply, that you explain why you've done it, so that they know that you've done it.
Absolutely. Yeah, so hopefully that's cleared that one up. So that's really useful. I've got a question come in from one of our members saying that the pupils He's currently training. He's actually quite independent in the driving, so I'm taking it that your pupil's coming up for test soon. Is it still feasible to ask questions about what they are looking at and planning? I would say so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, not a problem with that at all. It's like anything, you need to be careful not to overload with questions.
Mm.
We often use the analogy that it's illegal to drive with a mobile phone because you're being distracted whilst holding a conversation, etc. You know, if you liken you giving instructions or asking questions all the time whilst they're driving and trying to drive independently, it could be distracting. So we'd have to obviously assess that and we'd see how the pupil was coping with that. But of course, you know, you need to get some understanding as the instructor to what the pupil is thinking, what are they seeing. It might be through very carefully tailored questioning, you will identify a weakness in their driving that you wouldn't normally identify just by sitting and observing. So yeah, of course it's reasonable to be asking questions whilst they're driving independently. You're not telling them what to do, but you're just confirming, if you like, what they're seeing, what the processes they are using. So yeah, that's a perfectly reasonable teaching method.
And let's face it, it's realistic, isn't it? Because when they're off and they've passed, they're into the world of driving on their own, then they're never going to talk again to anyone. Then of course not, So we do need to chat with them, but obviously understand their boundaries. Some people can talk more than others, can't they? We know that. So it's making sure that we understand if people are happy to have a chat with you or discuss something on the move if it's appropriate, then okay, or ask them questions because they're going to need to deal with that level of distraction anyway.
Yeah, and it's about managing that expectation, isn't it? And also, I mean, we'll come on later on to timely feedback. I'm sure that's one of the 7 that we cover, and that's about knowing when to talk and when to let them focus and concentrate on what it is they need to do, or whether you need to pull the car into the side of the road in order to have the conversation to take away that risk.
Absolutely. Just another quick question. Would we need to re-explain use of duals, possible physical intervention, steering, etc., just for the standards check when we have covered and explained it previously?
It's an interesting one. We would hope we'd be able to see that you've already done it. However, I wouldn't necessarily expect somebody to, if you've done it before, then just a quick question. Just remind me what our policy is for the dual controls, and get the pupil to do the work, and that signs the box off then, doesn't it? Because it clearly shows that they understand what the agreement has been.
Sure. Yeah, it's acknowledgement of a previous agreement, as you say, isn't it? It's that could be sufficient as far as that's concerned. So you're not sort of patronising or feeling like they're being spoken down to. We've gone through the dual controls. They know they're there. You've taught them for 20 hours and they know they're there. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's just confirmation of their knowledge.
Yes.
But getting them to do it, which is the whole thing that the standards check is trying to encourage them to be more involved. So by asking them a question, it helps them to feel more involved and take more responsibility for their learning.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. So I hope that's answered your question, guys. 2 or 3 of you actually were on the chat box just then asking the same question. So that was useful to go over that point, John. Thank you.
No problem.
Pop on to the next slide.
Yeah, that should be the positives for this.
Yeah. So yes, so the positive side of that. So I mean, we don't need to read each one out. People can have a little read through of those, and don't forget, everyone, it's been recorded, so you can watch it back at your leisure once it goes into the members area, which it will do shortly.
And they're all in the ADI one as well. So
Absolutely, yeah. I've been asked that question already, and I've replied Google ADI one, you'll find it. So it's in there, and also it's in our book,
yeah,
the Essential Guide. I did, put a fair amount of that in there because it's official information. So it's good to know. Okay, right. So let's pop on to this one then. Let's have a little look at this one.
yeah, sufficient feedback given to help pupils understand any safety critical incidents. Let's start at the back there, safety critical incidents, so situations that may have arisen during the course of the lesson that safety critical potential danger, just another way of saying it. And you need to acknowledge that those situations occurred. You're not going to stop all situations arising. Probably if you are stopping all situations occurring, there is potentially an argument to suggest that you might be over-instructing and not actually allowing your client, your pupil, to stretch their boundaries and take responsibility, for you to transfer from your seat across into their seat. So yes, risk cannot be got rid of, and therefore there will be situations where the candidate's gone to emerge into the path of a car, for instance, whether that be joining in a roundabout or turning right across approaching traffic, and you'll have to take control using the dual controls maybe, but what you mustn't do is then just sign it off as, oh, that was just a little mistake. We need to obviously investigate that properly and find out why it is they made that mistake. Now, it might not be appropriate for you to go into that in great detail immediately, but I would certainly want to say to them, okay, don't worry about that for now, but just remember that, because we're going to revisit that as soon as we can. And then when you do get the opportunity, and I would suggest you probably, if it is a safety critical incident, you're going to be looking for somewhere safe to pull up, because you're probably going to have to have a reasonably lengthy conversation about it to understand and explore and analyse the situation that's just occurred. And yeah, just look at it. But we do see situations happen where the instructor doesn't appear to be aware, or just seems to ignore or acknowledge that the situation occurred. And of course, this is where this then gets reflected.
Absolutely. So hopefully that again that all makes sense to everyone. I mean, it is very much, as John said, the opportunity we need to make sure that we're developing these thinking drivers, and because if we do that at this level, then that's going to then equip them better with strategies and things like that for the future, isn't it? So you're gonna develop them better from that point of view as thinking drivers, as it were, to deal with similar situations or things, or in the future. So hopefully that will help them to deal with, or maybe reduce that risk. Okay. Are you still there, John?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, just went quiet for a moment. That's fine. My heart
and again, the next slide will have the positives on.
Yeah. Okay. Let's have a little look at these ones then. Okay.
At the top of the list, finding a safe place to stop.
Yeah.
Yeah, as I said, even if somebody's at the train stage, the likelihood is, if a situation like that has occurred, you're going to want to have a reasonable, lengthy conversation about it in order to explore it effectively. So you're going to need to probably do that at the side of the road.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then it's supporting the pupil as well. In many ways, they might be upset about the mistake. It might be they don't understand why they've done it. So you need to there's many tools in the toolbox of the instructor, and you need to just sympathetically apply the right tool to get the best out of the situation that's occurred and use it as a learning opportunity.
Absolutely. It's again, isn't it? It's kind of positive reframing. You know, put everything on a, once you've dealt with it in it as it's happened, as you say. You know, however it's appropriate to respond to it at that time. Whether, you know, as you say, someone's really frustrated or upset about something that they've done. Then it's yeah, turn it into a learning opportunity, turn it into a positive, and get them to maybe look at it objectively, get them to do a mind map or something along those lines so they can unpick it and understand when they went wrong. That gives them a bit more control, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. So yeah, and also, you know, providing, I think, did you cover that one? Providing the input, yeah, to clarify aspects of the incident so that the pupil doesn't understand. So yeah, that when we're all in a situation where we're learning, or you know, we've all got the pupils that we teach, and we can empathise with them because we've all been near them ourselves. Sometimes you can feel a bit. You know something's gone wrong, but you can't quite put your finger on why or quite understand what went wrong on that occasion. So, as John said, it's just, you know, supporting them appropriately, and help them to understand. I mean, knowledge is power, isn't it? So to understand why something went wrong, then you can fix it. That's fine. But without finding out why, then that problem will probably continue.
Yeah, and you'll notice that a lot of these competencies appear to link with each other. So a little bit later on, we come to one of the lower competencies that talks about allowing the pupil time to analyse the fault, getting them involved with it. And that links in with what you just said there, Olivia, providing input to clarify aspects of the incident the pupil doesn't understand. But you've probably gone through a process of having a discussion with them to try and find out why they did something. And then it's become clear that they've got a hole in their knowledge. And that's then when it's your job as the instructor to come out and to plug that gap and to give them the knowledge that helps them understand what they need to do differently next time in order to avoid the situation recurring.
Yeah, I mean, that's where you, from an instructor point of view or trainer point of view, that's where we could switch our training approach from coaching, say, to full instruction or to direct instruction, isn't it? Where we could, it's understanding, it's kind of feeling your way through it, and sometimes, you know, as we get to know our pupils well, but every now and again something might even catch us off guard, and they might react in a different way, or they might not know something that we assume they did. I mean, it can happen. But you know, when, as you say, when they do have that gap, that bridge to cross, if you like, to use a sort of road analogy, then we need to then tell them and switch between that our teaching approach, if you like. So okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So just another question on here. One of the members said, the reality is that we know our pupil, not the examiner. If we miss something out, like mentioning the jewels, because they have not been needed for the last 10 hours, therefore, do we need to say these things to meet the examiner's tick boxes? What would your opinion be?
It shouldn't be seen as a tick box exercise, and certainly not how examiners look upon it. If something was missed out in the grand scheme of things, that's one element of a lower competence. If all the other elements of that competence were being demonstrated, then I see no reason why we wouldn't still award you maximum marks. We're having a holistic look at this, and I think that's important to stress. So we're not looking for perfection in order to score a 3 in each of the 17 lower competencies. We are looking for a generally good, safe standard. That's what we're looking for. And I think it's important to stress that a good lesson before, on the old system, the old check test, will be recognised as a good lesson now on the standards check.
Okay, brilliant. Okay. just another question that's coming if I can. Someone's asked, when they're on the lessons, sometimes when they're on the move, they may take some notes and jot some things down so they don't forget to mention things. Is this still acceptable on on the standards check?
Yeah, you do obviously need to be careful. One of the lower competencies was the instructor aware of their surroundings. And if you are making notes and you're doing it in what, as an examiner, we would call a non-comfort zone, i.e. you're approaching hazards, there is that potential that you may miss something that could lead to a safety critical incident. So yes, by all means make notes if it helps you remember what needs to be discussed, but keep them brief, I would suggest, and make sure that when you are writing, you're doing it in a comfort zone, i.e. where nothing is really going on.
Absolutely, yeah. It's using your judgment, isn't it? And making sure, as you say, couldn't put it better myself. Perfect. I mean, again, someone just asked. Sorry to go back. We've mentioned under risk management how drugs and things can affect risk. Do we have to mention this when we discuss how risk will be shared, or only if the opportunity arises?
Again, I think we need to use a little bit of common sense. That if you're presenting a pupil in the early stages of learning, and you haven't had the opportunity to have that conversation yet because it didn't seem necessarily appropriate in the early doors, and it fits with the lesson that you're doing, then yeah, it might be that you've got a pupil who you've had, as you say, you've had for 20, 30, maybe even 40 hours, and you only reconfirmed it a couple of lessons ago. So therefore, to go over it again might come across as patronising. Then I think it's not unreasonable for it not to be mentioned. From my point of view, I haven't really, on the standards checks that I've sat in the back of, I haven't really heard that referred to, but equally I haven't marked people down because they haven't referred to it.
Okay, yeah, so, okay, brilliant. Another, just a quick one before we must move on in a moment, everyone, but brilliant, keep your questions coming. We may not be able to answer them all on the move, as it were. We may do them at the end, but someone said also, I use a reflective log on my iPad at the start and end of a lesson. Can I use my iPad for this purpose on the standards check? I would say yeah, as long as you weren't moving.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
In a nutshell.
As we were just saying, see last conversation, I think, on that one. So yeah, iPads and things, yes, they can be a bit of an issue, can't they? But it's
they're recognised by DVSA as a valuable learning tool, a valuable teaching aid. But you need to be aware of the legal requirements.
Yes.
With electronic devices being operated in the front of the vehicle. Technically, you are the accompanying driver when you've got a learner sat alongside you, and basically no electronic handheld device whilst the car is on, effectively. So really, technically, even at the side of the road and switched off.
Yes.
But yeah, common sense prevails with that, and I'm sure everybody that's listening is already aware of the legal requirements regarding iPads. But no, we do recognise them as valuable teaching aids.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, some more questions are coming in, guys, but that's brilliant. We're just going to move on, if that's all right, and we'll come back to those at the end. So let's have a little look at the next one. So we're on to the teaching and learning strategies. Yeah, so did you want to go for this one, John?
Okay, teaching style suited to the pupil's learning style and current ability. As I'm sure you're all aware, all pupils have their own preferred learning style. And the standards check is about being client-centered. And there is some confusion out there still about if we're being client-centered, then we must use coaching techniques mind mapping, just to name a couple of the tools, a bit of scaling even. They are all useful tools, and if those tools fit with your client's learning style, then that's great. But they won't work with everybody, because you will have some clients, some pupils that will say, hold on a second, you're the professional instructor, you tell me what I'm supposed to be doing next.
Yeah.
And they have clearly chosen what it is they want to do and how they want to be taught. So you now need to choose an appropriate tool to match their teaching style.
Yeah, definitely.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does to me. Hopefully it does to everyone else. I mean, it's just, as you say, we're using the toolbox analogy a lot, but it's perfect for this, because it's finding out, how does this person learn? How does this person take on board information, make sense of it? How do they work? So being a bit of a detective, asking a few questions which are appropriate to the learning environment, to find out and establish perhaps how this person has achieved things in the past, or how they've learned things before, and that type of thing. I mean, I believe that's quite a standard practice amongst ADIs, to find out what they've done before, but you know, any particular achievements, or if they've come across a hurdle, you know, see if you can liken it to something they've done out of the driving environment, to say, well, okay, how did you deal with that then? So again, it's getting them to think about it, isn't it? Getting them to actively problem solve, but you're there to facilitate that as well, and to help.
Yeah, but as you say, if you've got a client that wants you to do the work, and doesn't matter, you've created that environment to give them the opportunity to be involved and to be engaged, but they clearly state that, actually, I want you just to teach me. That's what I'm paying you for. And you therefore need to use what we would call more traditional driving techniques or teaching techniques, then that's fine, because that is in itself being client-centered. You are delivering what the client has asked for.
Yeah, yeah. Some people do learn that way, don't they? That is.
Of course they do. Yeah.
You know, just tell me what I need to do, and that's the way that they make sense of it and learn. So.
Yeah, and if you persist with a teaching style that is clearly at odds with the pupil's learning style, then learning won't take place. So you're not going to get the most out of it, or they're not going to get the most out of it. And that's where, and this is where we would reflect that if we observe that sat from the back on a standards check.
Absolutely. I mean, it's also, as well, I think, a really valid point to be aware of, as the ADI, your own learning style. I know that it can be very context driven, but also to have that level of self-awareness there, because sometimes if you're sort of predominantly you know, a highly visual learner, and you're coming out with all of these, you know, lovely pictures, or you know, visual learning aids for your pupil, but all they want to do is roll their sleeves up and have a go, then it's a lot of that's going to go over their head, isn't it?
Yes.
It's
yes.
Being self-aware as well, because sometimes it can come out in the way we teach, and we don't sometimes realise that, because it makes sense to us.
Yeah, you need to have more than one tool in your toolbox.
Yeah.
Because what works for one person won't work for everybody, and it's being flexible. And I'm sure that's not anything new to anybody that's listening in today.
No.
But you know, this client-centered sort of understanding, if you like, is it's about adding additional, as it says in the last paragraph here on the screen, it's about adding additional tools to your toolbox, not new tools and forgetting about the old ones. You know, we used the check test for many, many years, based around the three core competencies of fault ID, analysis, and remedial action. And that's still as good a place as any to start. So don't go losing those. But we need to then add some of the other more modern ways of doing things, some of the coaching techniques, alongside that, and dipping in and dipping out as and when required.
Absolutely. Okay, let's have a little look at the next slide. What does that bring us? Okay, so we have, you know, what is client-centered learning? So it's as a high level kind of visual representation of it. It's a combination. These are the teaching, the Q&A, the coaching are just some of the tools in our toolbox from a high level approach that we could use in order to make sure that we are delivering what that customer, what that client needs at that time. So, you know, it's just sometimes, as John said, you might have a customers, you know, we get them who are more, they like to be told and like to be given that instructional based training. Some don't respond to that so well, and they like to get involved with it and to think through problems, and so every now and again with that coaching approach they do need to be told, because they'll come to a point where they don't know, so they need that hole filled in, if you like, in order then for them to continue. So that's just you know, just something to very basic, just to bear in mind, to put that kind of those words into more of a visual way. You can tell I'm a visual learner, can't you?
Yeah, and I think one of the things, it's key. It's fine for a customer to choose to have a more direct style of learning, where it is very much telltale from the instructor's seat to the learner's seat. However, in order to have established that, you need to at least create an environment where you've asked the right questions to see if they'll interact with you, to then establish, well, actually, that's not their learning style. Their learning style is to be told.
Yeah, yeah. It's going back to the national standards, isn't it, for driver and rider training, that unit 6.2, which is about designing learning programs. It's a lot of it's going back to that level, isn't it?
Yes.
To find out. So, you know, hopefully everyone's on board with the national standards now, but if not, go to gov.uk website and type into the search bar at the top national standards, scroll down to the ones which said for driver and rider training, and have a little look at that unit on there.
And ultimately, that's what underpins the standards check.
Yeah, that's it. Find out how does this person operate, and then we need to train accordingly. Otherwise, learning won't take place as effectively or at all. Okay, so let's have a little look at the next one. So lack of indication of lack of competence. Yeah, so as you've said, John, adopting the teaching style that's clearly at odds with their learning style. Learning's not going to be taking place. It's not a good environment for them to be learning. Failing to check with the pupil whether the approach they're taking is acceptable. So just carrying on regardless. So I think that's what that means. Would you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So other ways of failing to explore other ways of addressing a particular point. So coming at it from a different point of view, perhaps. If they like to be, you know, they like to be fed and told information, fine. And you've established that and agreed that, that's great. And you know that they respond well to that, then that's fine. But if they don't, then look at it from a different point of view and perhaps get them to unpick it, get them to work their way through it with some open-ended questions from you. So
the last one's interesting there, ignoring safety issues.
Yeah.
That's from the point of view, if you've got somebody who likes to have a go, shall we say, so they don't want to be told, they want to do a bit of experiential learning.
Yeah.
What you've got to do as an instructor is obviously make sure you keep the lesson safe. So you just because they want to do it on their own and try and work it out for themselves doesn't mean say you can let anything happen. You've got to maintain control.
Yeah, and that's never changed. That was on the old check test form, wasn't it? Control of lesson, and that is still obviously very much key with the standards check as well, because it's making, as you say, if people comes to you and say, right, I want my example is they want to go and do that spiral roundabout on dual carriageways when they're on like the second or third hour of training when they haven't driven before, then it's okay, well why do you want to do that? And it's understanding and listening to why and the reasoning behind it. Some of the time it could be a peer pressure point of view, or It could be something which they've got to do once they've passed their test. It's a journey they need to take every day for work or something, so they're terrified of it, or they've had a bad experience, or that type of thing. And it's just understanding as well, and asking them the questions. If they're still adamant of doing it, then okay, so what would you need to do? What are almost like the ingredients of dealing with spiral roundabouts and dual carriageways? So what do you need to do? And it's getting them to understand it, isn't it? Getting them to see those tasks that they need to complete, and they're not quite there. It's that doing a gap analysis with them in a subtle way.
Yeah, it's not dismissing their desire out of hand,
No.
but it's managing their expectation, so that you'll say, yeah, okay, that's a long-term goal that we can work towards, but in order to achieve that goal, we need to go back and we need to do this, this, and this. Therefore, how about we work on this today?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. So you've now got agreement, and that's back to linking into your planning.
Yeah. Perfect. Absolutely. So yeah. So hopefully the safety, ignoring safety issues. That's because you look at it and you think, oh, what's that all about? Surely everyone does that. But again, it can be where I know the client-centered learning bit, or if people haven't quite got their minds around it, feeling that the pupil can dictate, if you like, what's going to happen on the lesson, which obviously we know isn't the case. We need to, as you say, get them more in control of their learning rather than in control of the lesson as such. It's a case of them us managing that, as you say, those expectations in that way.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Let's have a little look at the elements that the competence is there. So actively working to understand how they can best support the pupil's learning process. So did you want any more comments on that, John?
Again, it's if you've got a candidate that's examiner speak, apologies for that. You've got a pupil that you've only just met. You might not fully understand the best way that you can support that client. You might therefore need to use a variety of teaching styles in order to help you try and establish what is best for them. However, if you've got somebody who's done 40 hours with you, I would imagine by then you'll probably have a very good idea of what makes them tick, what works for them, what doesn't work for them. Yeah. So it's acknowledgement, if you like, from ourselves that you might not necessarily have all the answers, and you might occasionally have to pull the wrong tool out of the toolbox because you're still finding out about your customer.
Yeah, you're kind of feeling your way through it at that point, aren't you? When you have a new customer, what works? Try this, try that. If you haven't got much to go on. So yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So making sure you're providing that accurate and technically correct demonstration instructor information. So yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're giving wrong information or giving a demonstration which is wrong, then that's going to be lead to bad places.
Yeah, if you're telling somebody to go at a junction when it's clearly not safe to go,
yeah,
then that clearly can't be overlooked.
No.
Because that's giving dangerous instruction.
Yeah, and that's raising some questions about the ADI as well, isn't it? So,
indeed, and there'll be quite a bit of linking going on in the form there. It'll be into risk management, teaching and learning strategies. Was technical information given correct? There's a few competencies that would start to dip with something as extreme as that, and it is extreme. Let's make that quite clear.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So so as you say, linking in that theory to learning in practice. So what would you say to that for everyone?
It's taking opportunities that may arise, or even linking in previous experience that the the pupil may have, and linking that into what it is you're trying to achieve, transferring knowledge from one skill that has a purpose in a new skill. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we all heard about the walk across rule.
The what, sorry?
The walk across rule. If you can walk across, you can drive across.
Absolutely, yeah. The walk across rule,
that probably is the one that sums that up. You know,
it does.
They know how to judge a safe gap because they haven't been killed yet by walking across a road.
That's it, yeah.
So it's linking that side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And they can be, as you say, things which are in a completely different aspect of their lives to driving. As you say, like just basically crossing the road. So yeah. Okay, and yeah, encouraging the pupil to take ownership of the learning process. So hopefully that's been explained a fair amount up until this point.
It's quite a big competence, this one.
Yeah.
I think it goes on to the next slide as well.
Yeah, let's have a little look at the next slide. Yeah. So there was your responding to faults in a timely manner. I mean, obviously, as we were saying earlier, if it's a safety critical incident, you obviously need to deal with that ASAP, or any faults as soon as possible in a timely manner, and just making sure that you do follow up on those things. And as you say, don't just leave it or gloss over it if you feel it's quite basic.
Absolutely, and the second one there, providing enough uninterrupted time to practice new skills. You know, don't try and move on too quickly. Give them time to get used to the skills that they've just been given, and to not necessarily perfect, but at least feel more comfortable with their new skills before moving on. Yes, we need to stretch people, but don't stretch them to the point of breaking.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, lots of other things, pressures on ADIs can influence that decision. You know, pressure from parents, pressure from them. It could be financial things, all sorts of things that we get as pressures to try and speed sometimes the process up. But you can't speed somebody's learning up if you're tuned into them and you're hitting all the right notes with them, as it were, with their learning. They're going to learn at their own pace. And we can't really speed that process up because they're going to learn as quick as they learn.
Indeed.
Okay. So, and again, you know, I think we're all pretty good at this, hopefully. So providing the pupil clear guidance about practicing outside of the lesson. So, yeah, accompany practice with mum and dad, or with the other half, or something like that, friends or relatives, and in terms of not just what they could be practicing in terms of a teaching topic, but also with regard to, you know, correct vehicle insurance and the positioning of L plates and all sorts of things like that. It branches out into so many bigger things. So that would also come into that, I would have thought.
Yeah, and there might not be the opportunity in 1 hour snapshot for us to see, and we're certainly not going to see all of those elements that make up that competence. But again, it's the holistic view. It might well be that we've seen enough to think, you know, he didn't need to, you know, the instructor didn't need to do any more. Well, you know, yes, okay, they could have gone and ticked the box and done this one and done this one, but actually, to what benefit was that for the pupil? The pupil clearly had got the message. They got the right teaching style for them. You know, learning was clearly taking place. Did we really need to explore it any further? No. So, you know, we're not looking. I mean, there was probably about 9 or 10 different examples there of things that make up positive evidence for that competence. We're not looking for them all.
Yeah. As you say, it's more the holistic view with some of these things, isn't it? Because I mean, obviously, my example, I've gone into it in quite some depth there, and that wouldn't be necessary or sometimes appropriate for every single lesson. But it's something which just, you know, as ADIs, we keep up our sleeves and deploy as and when necessary. Again, it's another tool, isn't it? Knowing when to use that one. Okay. So this one here, this one is always a popular one. So was the pupil encouraged to analyse problems and take responsibility for their learning? So
I think for this one, it's understanding why it's advantageous for the pupil to analyse their problems and not for you not to be the one that does the analysing for them.
Yeah,
because it's about them having the skills to be safe drivers for life. And with the best will in the world, instructors can't teach pupils everything.
no.
It's not possible. You can't take them to every situation they may encounter over their driving career, from being 17 to being well past 70. Even 80 or 90, as the television programme last night was 100-year-old drivers.
Yes.
It's not possible. But what you can do is you can give them the skills to look at a situation, to analyse it, and to work out the best way to tackle it. But if you constantly analyse things for them, you don't give them those skills.
No. It's very superficial, isn't it? It's ticking a box on one hand, but it's not actually doing them justice or doing them any favours. As we were saying earlier, you know, it's giving them those strategies, coping strategies, to be able to deal with this or something similar, or in the future when they're on their own.
Yeah, and it also gives them a certain amount of control of their own learning, their own destiny. And so they feel part of the lesson.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's have a look at some of the lack of competencies on there. So as you were just saying there then, John, the first one is leaving the pupil feeling that the ADI was in control of the teaching process. So with some, that will make people feel quite frustrated and quite you know, annoyed. They don't feel that they're getting value for money. They don't feel that they're gaining anything. They might feel that they're going backwards and might end up leaving that ADI and finding the next person on the website. So in a really bad case, so that could possibly lead to those situations. Making sure and also failing to explore the alternative ways of addressing the problem. So that's very similar, isn't it, to one of the other lower competencies we've just looked at on a previous one, about looking at things from a different perspective and getting them to problem solve where appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, if you get the pupil to help you analyse and actually take responsibility, you are more likely to come up with the correct solution to help them fix whatever the problem was.
Absolutely.
Rather than making assumptions yourself.
Yeah, that's it. It's asking the question and answering it yourself sometimes. So it's as we said before in previous conversations, Sean. It's the 2 ears, 1 mouth, and use them in those proportions, isn't it?
Absolutely. And if you're going to ask a question, make sure the question's worth asking, and then wait for the answer.
Yes, absolutely. And providing unsuitable or correct inputs. Okay. What was that?
I suppose that's guiding them down a certain path that possibly is on the right path to guide them down. So you need to, with your question and answer, it needs to be suitably tailored to help the pupil analyse correctly, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are ways and means, aren't they? But if you say something that's inappropriate to try and help them analyse,
yeah,
that particularly portrays the wrong attitude maybe towards another road user or something along those lines, then that could possibly be reflected there. There's another competency on the SC one that also talks about behaving in a discriminatory manner.
Yes.
Again, linking into it that way as well.
That's still under the teaching and learning strategies, if I remember correctly.
All under teaching and learning strategies, yeah.
Yeah, it's not one of the ones I think we're going to look at this evening, but it's certainly on there. Yeah, okay. So moving on, let's have a little look at this one. So we're all leading up to this one, aren't we? We've been touching on this quite a lot. Was the pupil encouraged to analyse problems and take responsibility for their learning?
And this is the positives.
These are the positives, yeah, that's it. So providing, yeah, make sure time, suitable location, as you're saying, try and respond to things as soon as reasonably you reasonably can, to explore any problems. I think the to explore, I think that's quite a key word, isn't it? So we want them to where the learning style suits and where that pupil will respond to that method is to get them to explore it rather than or it could be if they like to be told, then we'll explore it and we'll discuss it almost for them so they can hear it from that point of view.
Yeah, and how much you allow this to happen will depend on the learning style that they have demonstrated or that they want to be taught by. So it might be that you ask, so why do you think you did that, to somebody that's quite willing to fully engage with you, and you can just sit back and listen to their thought process. Or it might be, it has to be a more guided route. So why do you think you did that? Was it because of A or was it because of B? To help you narrow down what went on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and again, taking the time, suitable techniques to understand the pupil had with understanding an issue. Again, I think that one I would say links back to one of the ones we dealt with recently, a few slides back. And again, as you say, they're all these lower competencies. They're very much interlinked. And I think I would say that this one that links back. I can't remember exactly which one it was now, but it certainly links back, doesn't it, to getting them to understand things and maybe from a different perspective, or however they work. So suggesting suitable strategies to help the pupil develop their understanding. So, for example, using practical examples, it says, or pointing them at further reading. Yeah, so again, understanding your pupil, making sure that you know what works for them. Some people like the books. They're bookworms. They love to get their head in a book. They might be studying English lit or something, but other people, no, not interested. They like their iPhones or they like their tablets. So as examples, and pointing them at this other further reading or videos or something like that they can watch to enhance their learning.
Yeah, absolutely. It's again, there is linking between a lot of the lower competencies, but not all the time.
No.
And that's not always obvious to the ADI, and at the end of the day, that's why the SC1 is the examiner's marking sheet, and not for the instructor. Yes, it will give you a profile of your performance of the hour, but I'm trying to think of an example where I can give that will help explain linking between the different lower competencies. That always fits in with some of these 7 that we're talking about this evening. We've talked about risk management and giving feedback on a situation. And let's just say you've got somebody who is at a train stage and they've, for whatever reason, emerged at a roundabout. You've made them aware of it and you've come straight out onto a road after it that's absolutely dead quiet. They're quite responsive. They're used to you talking on the move. It's not going to take a massive amount to fix. So you think you can have a couple of quick questions and answers and solve it. Great. Now on its own, standing alone, it doesn't really link with anything else. But if we then take it further where you forget to give them feedback and you start talking about other things and then you start coming into other hazards, it starts to link in, maybe your instructions start to be late. So you start to have a knock-on effect onto other competencies. So the examiner will have to be quite careful that they watch the whole picture of what occurs in order to decide whether one or more competencies need to be assessed with that particular situation.
Yeah, okay, good to know. And again, yeah, as you say, it's from our point of view, being on the ADI side of things, it's always we haven't gone through the training that and the having that knowledge that you do, so always good to hear that from your point of view. That's brilliant. Okay, let's have a little look at the next one. So was the pupil given appropriate and timely feedback during the session?
I think, again, it's about, we've covered some of this already when we talked about risk management, but all too often we hear some quite good feedback given, but given so late in the lesson, it can be of little or no benefit to the pupil. And quite often it might be back at the test centre in the actual recap at the end where this feedback is given. So it's about taking advantage of things that have occurred during the lesson in a timely fashion so that you can utilise it for learning to take place.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, we do accept that there will be things that happen at the end or near the end of a lesson where if you had another 20 minutes to run, you would love to go and revisit, but time simply doesn't allow. Well, we have to be realistic about that. You make them aware of it, you have a conversation of it, but you haven't then got time to go on and practice. So you would, part of your planning, if you like, for your next lesson, because planning is a continual thing that doesn't just happen at the beginning, it happens throughout and it happens at the end, and it's a constant 360. That part of your planning for the next session would be to say, so I think it would be wise for us to revisit that at the beginning of the next lesson. Would you agree? And using that way, and that would perfectly satisfy the fact that you basically are time bound.
It's coming back to those SMART objectives, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Was it specific, measured, accurate, achievable, realistic and time bound? Yeah, so yeah, absolutely. Making sure that, as you say, it's a snapshot, isn't it? Standards check is just a snapshot of what you do. And there won't be opportunity to demonstrate absolutely everything. So it's not trying to cram a pint into a half pint pot, if you like.
Yeah, and on the second paragraph there, feedback needs to be relevant, positive and honest. There's no point giving a pupil false hope. You need to, we don't want to make them so depressed that they don't want to come back, but we need to, if, as you say, you're using SMART objectives, that you're making sure that the goals that you've set during the lesson are achievable, albeit stretching them a wee bit, then you can give honest feedback of where they need to improve, but equally where their strengths lie and what they're doing well.
Yeah. Okay.
It's about balance.
It is. The whole thing is. Yeah. Okay. Let's have a little look at the lack of competencies on this one then. Yeah. So as you said, John, providing feedback such a long time after something's happened that the pupil can't link it, or sometimes they can't remember it.
Absolutely.
The brain's a bit like a VHS videotape, isn't it? It will just get to a point and overwrite itself. So yeah, and as you say, feedback that overlooks a safety critical incident, obviously that can't happen. Continuously providing feedback when this may be distracting. So again, that's a lot of that's about understanding your pupil, isn't it? And understanding and bearing in mind the all-round, knowing what they, how they respond. Are they able to deal with questions on the move and things like that? Or do they need to have that time to think? What's going on ahead?
yeah, and the environment that you so happen to find yourself in at this moment in time.
Yeah, that's it. And responding to all of that, isn't it? Being aware of your surroundings. So yeah, and making sure that yeah, the last one's interesting, isn't it? Refusing to hear
Yeah,
reasonable feedback about the AVI's own performance.
yes. You know, at the end of the day, feedback is about giving and receiving.
Yeah.
And if the pupil would like to give you some feedback, you need to be receptive to that,
Yeah.
even if it doesn't feel particularly comfortable. I have to say it's rare we see that, but you know, it's not unreasonable to have it in there.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Lovely. So again, on the flip side of that, you know, all the elements of competence are in place. Are the kind of polar opposite to all of those bullet points, aren't they? So making sure you're giving the feedback in response to the question, so the feedback's relevant, it's timely. The appropriate opportunities to provide feedback reinforces understanding or confirms achievement of learning objectives. Feedback about failure to achieve learning objectives, so helping to get the pupil to achieve and understand what they need to do to improve. And again, that the way you come at that will depend on the pupil, won't it? Because it depends on whether they like to be told things or whether they like to have a little work things out for themselves to a point.
Yeah, have you got a pupil that likes the modern techniques and the coaching, and you've used scaling throughout the lesson, and we do see scaling used with varying degrees of success on standards check, I have to say. You need to use the tools for a purpose. But if you do use scaling to help work out how they feel about where they are with their learning, that could be quite useful.
Yeah, it's getting them to be sort of aware, isn't it, to self-monitor, if you like.
So if they come back and they say, oh, I feel like it was a 6, so what do you think you need to do then in order to make that an 8, for example?
Yeah.
And they might then tell you what they need to do. So you've now linked it into, so turning a point where they might not have been particularly good, but you're now looking forward and you're planning and agreeing what they need to do differently next time in order to improve.
Absolutely, yeah, brilliant. So yeah, it's just making sure it's under, you know, a lot of it just comes down to understanding your pupil, and as you say, deploying those tools such as scaling as and when necessary. I mean, scaling can also be drilled down into further things, couldn't it? So you could use scaling, taking a left reverse, for example. You know, what do you think of that? Or where would you give yourself if they give themselves, say, something which is far too high a mark or far too low a mark, for example, they haven't judged it accurately enough, then you could maybe drill that down to perhaps you're thinking, well, they've given themselves a 9, but the observation wasn't all that. So you could say, well, in terms of the observation, where would you give yourself that mark on that scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being, say, the best? That could possibly help guide them in that right direction.
Certainly can.
Yeah, okay. Right, so, and again, the feedback reinforced by body language. Again, we all know what that means. I would have thought if someone's body language is quite, it will reflect, our body language reflects our inner thoughts and feelings, doesn't it, at the time? So if someone's clearly annoyed with something or frustrated, then that's going to be quite evident in their body language. And on the other side, if they're happy about something. So again, it's that active listening and that the non-verbal communication, which is just so important as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so have another little look then. I know we're over time, folks, but most people all people actually are still looking at the attendee list, are still with us, so that's really good. We will be obviously going on a little bit longer, so hopefully everyone can stay with us for this. Just want to make sure we're doing your evening justice, as it were. So I think this is the last one, or one of the last ones on there.
It is the last one,
It
yeah.
is the last
It's
one.
the 17th of the
Yeah.
17th lower competence.
Yeah. So yeah, making sure that at the end of session was the pupil encouraged to reflect on their own performance. So again, this one again is similar again, isn't it? Correct me if I'm wrong. Giving that feedback so long after an incident, the pupil can't remember what happened. Similar to the last one we looked at.
So you can see how it would be linking in.
That one will be linking, yeah. Providing feedback overlooks a safety critical incident, yeah. Providing feedback when it's maybe distracting the pupil, yeah. So again, it's the context, isn't it? It's the pupil, it's the surroundings, it's who's around you, what's going on, and taking all of that into account and being aware of your surroundings and the actions of the pupil. Again, failing to check the pupil's understanding of feedback. So you've given that feedback and thinking, right, okay, you've just delivered it like a letter through a letterbox. You've delivered it thinking, okay, that's fine. But it does need to go that step further, doesn't it? It's almost getting, it's checking with them, isn't it? Asking them a question. Is that okay? Or do you understand? Or are there any questions with that? And providing feedback.
I mean,
sorry, carry on.
Feedback needs to be relevant,
and
often relevant and realistic, and often it's not in what we hear in the end of session reflections, and often it's not even a reflection. It's often telltale. The ADI tells the pupil what they think of their performance, and the pupil just sits there in silence and isn't encouraged to participate in any way, shape or form.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I can. I mean, I'm saying not relate to it because I've always felt, I've always made sure that anyone I've trained, I do very much like their feedback, because it's feedback for me as well. Even if I'm not asking for feedback directly, I'm gaining that in that sort of indirect way. So that is really important.
Yeah, but equally the flip side is that you might encourage them to tell them to reflect, and they might simply say, and by doing that, you might say, so how do you feel that went? So you've encouraged them to reflect, and they might just look at you blankly and say, well, I don't know, in which case you have no choice but to probably go down the route of telling them, or we might need a little bit more directed questioning in order to try and get something out of them. But even then, it might not. Well, the thing is, the key there is, was the pupil encouraged to reflect? It didn't say, did the pupil reflect? Were they encouraged to reflect?
Yeah.
And as long as you've created an environment where they've had the opportunity, if they've chosen not to reciprocate, well, that's not your fault as the ADI, and you won't be penalised for it.
Yeah. It's that old saying, is that you can lead a horse to water. You can't make it drink. Yeah, it's that. Yeah, I mean you can't force them out of it. Okay, just having a quick look at these ones. If you want to just have a quick look at these last ones, John.
Yeah, providing feedback in response to questions from the pupil, obviously a good thing, and that would link into another one of the lower competencies that we've not looked at this evening, which is about was the pupil's queries answered in an appropriate time and appropriate manner. So that links in with that. Looking for opportunity to provide feedback, not just necessarily waiting to the end of the session. I know it does specifically say there at the end of the session, but there will be times during the session where you can maybe get them to reflect as well.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just having a look at what else we've got.
Yeah.
Putting it across in a way, in a language that the pupil can understand and relate to. That's important. But again, that goes without saying throughout the session, that you need to be using terminology that they relate to and can respond to.
Yeah.
And as I say, also making sure your own body language when you're delivering feedback is backing up what you're saying to them. So if you're telling them that was really good, but your body language says, actually, that wasn't very good at all,
Yes.
then, you're giving mixed messages.
Yeah. Yeah, confusing to put it mildly. Yeah.
Yes. So and it's also not honest feedback, is it? We talked about making sure that your feedback is realistic and honest already this evening. So that links in with that. One of the questions we often get asked with this one, just as a slight aside, is, well, I was late back. I knew you wanted it back on the hour, so I missed the debrief at the end.
Right.
And that's why we did it. But unfortunately, we need to have seen whether you encouraged the pupil to reflect on their own performance. And if you haven't made any attempt to do that, then unfortunately, very often the score will end up as a 0, which is a very easy way to throw away 3 marks potentially. And so that is something to reflect on now. It might be you got stuck in traffic the last few minutes as you were going back to the test centre. I don't know, set of traffic lights, temporary traffic lights got stuck on red or whatever the reason would be. Well, as an examiner, we would see that.
Yeah.
And we would, we would understand that that was the situation. So if you wanted to overrun slightly in order to make sure you've done that, then that's fine, that's acceptable. But also you might want to think on your feet and think, well, if I am stuck in a set of traffic lights going now, why don't I just reflect on the session now?
Yeah.
So again, you need to be adaptable.
Yeah, it's understanding as well from our point of view, what is almost not, I'm going to use the word allowed, so I think with a lot of ADIs which are, with us tonight that are quite new to the industry as well, perhaps haven't had a check test in their lives because they're only newly qualified. So it's just getting that sort of feeling their way through, what can I do, what can't I do as well, which is that last point you made there about, being adaptable and make it, if you are stuck and the lights are on red and you're late back, then yeah, you could utilise that time in that way.
Applying common sense,
Yeah.
we as the examiner sat in the back, we can see exactly the situation you're faced with.
Yeah.
And we understand, and we simply say to ourselves, well, what will we do in this situation?
Yeah.
And let's apply a bit of common sense.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot to be said for common sense.
There certainly is.
Okay, that's brilliant. That's the end of those 7 points, everyone. And so what we were going to have a little look at now perhaps is to go on to the questions. I know there are quite a few. This one was asked, these ones are going back quite a while now, an hour or so ago, but so hopefully we are going to address them, but sorry, they're a little bit late. Can we do a mind map on a standards check to see what the pupils are thinking? Hopefully it's not seen as time wasting. I would say, based on what we've discussed this evening and based on the fact that if you've got the pupil that likes that approach and it works for that person, then I wouldn't have thought that necessarily that, we have to stick with the old traditional give a briefing, it's got to be about 10 minutes or less type situation. Make it a bit more interactive. Give them the pen and paper, give them the iPad app, and whilst obviously you're at side of the road engine off, and ask them questions to try and generate what they know and what their understanding of it is. What would you say?
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree. Mind mapping, not a problem with it at all. Obviously needs to be used effectively in order to support the client's learning. But yeah, used effectively, not a problem. If it's used in a way that serves no real purpose, then that might be reflected in the teaching and learning strategies. But again, without going into a specific example, the principle of using mind mapping, not an issue at all. It can be a very, very useful tool for depending on how it's used for many, demonstrating a few of the competencies, including how risk and responsibility might be shared.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Because you might have several things, elements that make up a process. So let's say, for instance, you're doing roundabouts. In order to do a roundabout effectively, you need to approach at the right speed, you need to have observations, you need to have good road positioning, you need to have the correct gear. So all these things would go on to make up the mind map. And then you have a conversation about, so what do you think you can do well?
Yeah.
Well, I think I can get my speed and approach right and my gear right. Okay, so would you take responsibility for that? So now we're sharing responsibility. But actually I struggle with the observations on approach and knowing when to go. I'll tell you what, I'll help you with that then, shall I? So we've now set out where the responsibility for risk lies.
Yeah, that's it. Brilliant.
By using a mind map.
Yeah, that's it. And it's, as you say, you can just take one aspect of that and drill it down a bit, and that can be a lesson. Yeah. So are you still there, John? Oh, he's
Oh, I've lost.
Oh, can you hear us?
I can't hear.
Oh, okay. To try refreshing. Okay. Just as a quick thing on there, can everyone still hear me? All right. Just if you wouldn't mind,
Can people still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, John.
Okay. My headphones have packed in, but I've got you on the computer speaker now, so we're back again.
Oh, right. That's fantastic. Okay. Good stuff. That's brilliant. So let's have a little look. Right, so just going back a bit, using an example you were talking about where you talked about the roundabout before being ready. Okay, this is the perfect example of us. This is not the question, this is me talking now. This is a perfect example of going back to something which is now not, you can't see the relevance of it. So, questions too far gone down the line. So anyway, so using the example you're talking about now, about roundabouts before ready, that came up in the standard check, would it be sufficient to say, for example, on the next lesson, the ADI drives that roundabout and the pupil does the commentary how to navigate? Well, if that, again, it comes back to, I would say, I'm going to stick my head on the block here, John, and say, if that was the case and the pupil was happy and agreed, a demonstration would be a great way forward, takes the pressure off, but then they can do some work from the passenger seat, then I wouldn't see that as an issue.
No, again, it's down to agreeing that process with the client. If the client is happy to do that, and in fact would welcome it, then by all means, it's a recognised teaching technique.
Yeah, brilliant. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. Let's have a little look at this one. I find that a lot of coaching techniques take time to work with my learners. I tend to teach a lot more in the early days than weaning coaching as lessons progress. Okay. Again, I mean, just as I'm thinking maybe I would want some more information on that particular question from you. So perhaps call into DIA and we can have more of a one-to-one chat about that. That's where my head's going with that one instantly. I think that would be beneficial.
Yeah,
I'd like to find out.
I think I've got a gist of it in the sense that I think in the early days there is the tendency to need to have to give quite a bit more direct instruction. Full talk through when, for instance, getting somebody to move off for the first time. You might be able to do some experimental learning if that's the way they want to go, but again, the vast majority of clients would want to be told. But then as they get more confident and more independent, then more coaching style can kick in. It does lend itself more, potentially, although not exclusively. I think that's important to stress. It does lend itself more to a pupil that has got a little bit of experience rather than a complete beginner.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, again, it's just as you say, John, you know, finding out. Sometimes you in the early stages, yeah, there is that talk through, and that needs to happen. But again, it depends what we mean by early stage. I mean, early stages in a driving career, full stop. Then yeah, then that's fine, and we can introduce the coaching bits as and when we feel appropriate and necessary. But if it's something which they've driven before or they've got some good road experience, there are aspects of that you perhaps wouldn't want to talk through, or they wouldn't want you to talk through. You'd want to ask the questions more. That might be more of an appropriate approach. Okay. So another one. Let's have a little look. Got lots of them on here. Hold on. If a learner asks to try and do something with no help, for example, turn right at a roundabout, at what stage should we step in if they are blatantly going wrong? Or should we ask questions like, are you aware which lane we need for this? I think it's a case of prevent it from happening before it does, I would say.
It's about remembering your responsibilities, about keeping yourself, your client, your vehicle and everybody else around the vehicle safe. And yes, you need to let things develop, but equally you need to take control of the situation.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, brilliant. So have a little look. Someone's put scaling question mark. So if that's you and you're still with us, then please give me a call at DIA. Happy to have a chat with you in depth more about that, so I can give you the time. But effectively, scaling, I would say, is a way of helping to develop that learner's sense of self-awareness, getting them to evaluate where they think they are in their learning. And it can be quite an effective tool to help them help develop that level of self-awareness that we need to have. So it's quite it's quite a useful tool when deployed at the right time with the right person. So if you are still there and you still want to have a chat about that further, then please give us a call. Question for John: as an audit trainer, ADIs that are taking their standards check for the first time are getting feedback of don't treat it like a part 3. As the way our teaching coach is now assessed has changed to reflect reality. When is the part 3 going to change to reflect this? Okay, trainees and newly qualified instructors having to be taught to teach for the part 3 and coaching and CCL for such a large part of a learner's development. Okay, that's quite a long statement. I won't read the rest of it. Is there anything you'd like to mention on that one, John?
Yeah, I've actually seen the full question of it, so I've got the general gist of it.
Yeah.
We are reviewing the part 3. As for a timescale, I'm not able to give a timescale. It is true that the part 3 doesn't necessarily lend itself to the full set of all the client-centered tools and the coaching tools that the standards check is trying to reflect. You could argue that the pupil, well, in fact this is the case, that the pupil that the examiner chooses to portray is a pupil that wants a more direct style of instruction on the current part 3, and therefore the PDI should match their instruction to suit the learning style of the examiner, the pupil that the examiner is portraying. And there is a reason for that it's very difficult in a role play environment, and this is why role play was taken out of the standards check. It's very difficult in a role play environment for the examiner, who obviously is highly trained and knowledgeable in all matters to do with driving, to portray a learner who is encountering something for the first time and then go through that analysis process, that interaction that we've already talked about this evening. And therefore it would be unrealistic to do in a role-play environment. So yes, it is being reviewed because of that, and it therefore doesn't map directly across from a part 3 to a standards check. We acknowledge that, and we are reviewing it with a view to making some changes sometime in the future, but as for when that will come about, I don't know.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, John. Couple more, if you're okay. As a fleet trainer for over a decade, I don't have a pupil or car for the standards check. Also, I normally give a 3.5-hour minimum course and need to help consider condensing my training plan into 1 hour. 1 hour. All ideas are welcome. What would you?
Yeah, I mean, the standards check is set up to assess anywhere from a complete beginner through to a full license holder. The only type of client that you're not allowed to bring is someone who is Part 2 qualified or an existing ADI. Again, you just need to bring a pupil along that you have that needs some development, and it's a question of, you may have done an assessment on them if they are a full license holder, and you may have therefore already identified their risks. So you might summarise at the beginning of the session, for instance, or what those risks were that were identified, and then you may go off and work on those using the appropriate style that reflects their experience, ability and learning technique. Alternatively, you might want to do a 10-minute, 15-minute assessment of their drive and then go off, discuss those risks and go off and do that. But equally, you can bring a learner. There is no specific requirement anymore for somebody who is on the fleet register to have to do some sort of fleet lesson as part of the standards check.
Yeah, because before we had a fleet standards check, didn't we? And then we had the ADI one, or the ADI check test, should I say? Sorry, and fleet check test. So, and as you say, the standards check is designed for all levels.
Correct.
Yeah. So okay, hopefully that's answered your question. But again, if you want to ring in and have a chat further about that, then that's fine. Another one, do examiners have a preferred lesson subject when a fleet full licence holder has been given guidance on reducing their overall risk? I ask because I've heard various stories relating to this subject, whereas I would normally assess each driver and go from there.
I think that fits in quite nicely the answer I just gave, really. Again, there is no preferred subject. It just needs to be appropriate for the client and agreed with the client.
Yeah, that's it. Why is the standards check so feared by ADIs?
I'd love to know.
Yeah,
we try to be as open and honest and transparent about what we're looking for, so that you've got all that information that's in the ADI one that we've gone through this evening, and lots more that's out there in the public domain now, far more than we ever used to publish for the old check test. Therefore, they should come towards a standards check now with a position of knowledge, whereas before, I can accept there was probably a little bit of guesswork with the check test.
Absolutely. I mean, that SC1 for me, it looks more, you look at it, you think, oh wow, there's a lot, but to be honest, it's, as you say, transparency is the word you used, and that's quite key. As you say, it's far more transparent now than the old check test system, where, as you say, there was a fair bit of guesswork, let's be honest, and relying on books and things like that to try and scrape together pieces of information that will help you to a point. But now it's as you say, DVSA have taken a really good view and a good approach to this by by saying, look guys, this is what we're going to assess you on.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so which area of high competence has the lowest mark, and what are the numbers of percentages for ADIs achieving A, B and failing?
I mean, obviously we've looked at the 7 main reasons. We've called them the 7 deadly sins, or you've called them the 7 deadly sins this evening, and they're the ones that we have established that are some of the main reasons why people are scoring low marks or being unsuccessful on the standards check. But I wouldn't like to say which of those 7 is the lowest of them all, because I don't actually know. As far as percentages of AGIs achieving an A, B or failing is concerned, I have some figures. They're a little bit dated, I must stress that, but the last figures that I was able to put my eyes on came out as a grade A. 24% of standards checks were assessed as a grade A. 57% of standards checks were assessed as a grade B, and 19% resulted in a score that was considered to be substandard or a fail. Now that figure is slightly higher than what was maybe recorded on the old check test, where I think 14% was the figure that was recorded as a fail. But also, what we have to take into consideration there is on the old check test, about a fifth, I think it was 21% of those that were substandard were educational, so therefore weren't recorded as a fail. So that probably makes up, or does make up for that 5%, or what appears to be a 5% increase in the failure rate on the standards check. It's actually about the same, it's just recorded differently.
Okay, well hopefully that's good to know, and thanks for that explanation. Next question. I'm not sure actually, maybe you can understand it. I don't know, it's not computing with my brain at the moment, maybe it's getting late. When planning a test, I can only keep up with the situation by checking my notes, etc. What happens if the client takes the test vehicle off the planned route?
Well, we've already talked about the dangers of having a planned route and sticking rigidly to it. And only the instructors will know if they've got a planned route or not. As the examiner sat on the back, we're just taking where you take us. It's about being aware of your situation, and we talked about it earlier, didn't we, about making sure that if you are using notes, that you use them in comfort zones, so that as not to miss anything and find yourself in the situation while you are taking off route. So clearly we have the ability to assess that as we see it and reflect it on the SC1.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. What I'm going to do, I mean, there are so many questions on here that we can't answer every single one. I mean, we've been on for nearly 2 hours and we're 50 minutes over as it is. And also, you know, John, you've been fantastic tonight, and I've got some very positive comments on the screen about the conversation. So perhaps we'll cover one more, and then we'll wrap it up for tonight. What I'll do, everyone, is these questions, I'll get something in writing and maybe pop them in the driving instructor magazine or something under the help desk pages or something. So they will be addressed, or I might email you individually or contact you individually as well. So what I will address them with you. It's just we are, you know, we need a whole day really to get through them all. So hopefully that's all right with everyone, and you know, it's getting that time for bed soon. Everyone's got work tomorrow. Perhaps what would you say are the main differences between a check test and the standards check?
I think we are encouraging well, a more client-centered approach, aren't we? We're encouraging the instructor to try and create an environment where the pupil or the client takes responsibility for their learning and engaged, whereas on the old check test that probably wasn't so obvious, although it was welcomed when we saw it on the old check test. I must stress that. And as far as assessment is concerned, I've said this already this evening, but it is worth reiterating that a good lesson before, observed on a check test using the old core competencies, and recognised as a good lesson on the old check test, will also be recognised as a good lesson on the standards check. So in that sense, you could argue there's not a lot of difference, but there is the language that we use, the form that we use to give you feedback is better because it enables you to see a profile of your performance in a format that is more understandable than maybe the old check test form was, and therefore the feedback that we give you is better and enables you to go off and, if necessary or appropriate, to get development in a more targeted and specific way.
Okay, brilliant. I've got some very, as I say, so many questions on here. And as I say, we can't take any more this evening. But as I say, I will go through them with everyone. So hopefully that's okay with everyone. I'm trying to gain agreement, and I'm not getting any agreement back because I can't, because it's a one-way conversation. So hopefully that's all right. And as I say, we'll be in contact. Just like to say to you, John, thank you so much for taking 2 hours out of your evening tonight when an hour was planned. But as we were discussing last week, in fact, over the phone, that we wanted to do the session justice. I feel that we have, and I feel that you have. There are still questions rolling in, I can see.
I can see them too.
Can you? Yeah. You know, it's but I can download them and I can get the question log off at the end, and do all that tomorrow. So but thank you everyone. You know, you can see those things coming in there, John. You know, thanks for a great webinar. Thank you so much.
It's been very enjoyable from my point of view. I'm more than happy to help. You know, there are colleagues of mine across the country that are always happy to answer questions. So all test centres should have the telephone number or contact details for the supervising examiner, or the HEO with ADI responsibilities, I think is how it's worded on the poster, for your local area. And I know that they will all be more than happy to answer any questions that you have regarding the standards checks. Yeah. I'll probably thank you for the extra workload I've just given them, but that's what we're here for.
That's fantastic. Okay, so that's great. So just everyone, just a couple of, I mean, John's just given you some, you know, useful top tip in case you didn't know that, and some DIA useful contacts on there as well. So if you've got anything relating to this, if there's something I can't answer, I'll be asking John, because he's opened that door now, unfortunately for him. You've proven to be too useful now to let go of. So there are a couple of bits and bobs on there from our point of view, and just to say, yeah, have a little look at some of our future courses that we're doing. For those of you who are actively taking part in your CPD, we're still doing our drivers with diverse needs. We've got dates into the winter, and we'll be developing this into other further courses into 2016. Driver behaviour training day, again, that round is now finished but we are going to be bringing back more of that with Sandra, who's done a sterling job of delivering those, understanding a bit more science behind the way people drive and why they do the things they do. In autumn, we are launching some coaching training days, but for beginners, so nothing too taxing. So if you're already heavily into your coaching and you're all clued up, then perhaps this may not be one for you. Don't tell the boss I said that. But this is for those of you who are, thinking, oh, I need to know a little bit more about this, or I've heard this, and you just want that gentle introduction. That's the level that we're aiming for on this. And also our road shows are free for our members and non-members to come along and see us, and customer services will be the topic for the autumn round. So there will be information on the DIA website under the training pages for those who are interested in those, with dates and locations as well. That's all due to come out in the next couple of weeks. So hopefully that's good. We'll see lots of you on those. And again, I'll just reiterate, any questions with this, I will answer them. It might take me a while, but I will answer them. And I'll be probably bending John's ear, poor man. So yeah, again, thank you ever so much for your time this evening, John. And I think we'll wrap it up for this evening.
No, sounds good, and I wish everybody every success with any standards checks they might have coming up in the immediate future.
Brilliant. Okay. All right then. Thanks everyone, and we're going to bid you good night.